welcome to Beat Around the Barn. I'm Ella.
And I'm Ann. And we're addressing our second topic, which is what is a sanctuary? We've invited Sarah Cooperman from Rockfish Wildlife Sanctuary, as well as Dina Gilison-Brigish from the White Pig Animal Sanctuary, to come and have this discussion with us.
Dina Gilison-Brigish is founder and director of the White Pig Animal Sanctuary. It is located in Schuyler, Virginia, and works towards the rescue, care, and stewardship of large animals. As a sanctuary, rescued animals experience a loving, healthy, and enriching home to live out their lives. White Pig strives to help create a cruelty-free world for all animals through hands-on, immersive outreach and learning, as well as the promotion of an animal-free diet and lifestyle. Sarah Cooperman is the outreach coordinator at Rockfish Wildlife Sanctuary. While she loves teaching community groups about our native wildlife with the help of the sanctuary's education ambassador animals, she is first and foremost a permitted wildlife rehabilitator. Every spring and summer, the Rockfish team admits over 800 injured and orphaned wild animals. Their goal is to rescue, rehab, and release, which has given Sarah a unique perspective on what sanctuary work looks like.
Welcome to Beat Around the Barn, and we're tackling today our second topic, which is what is a sanctuary? This one's certainly near and dear to Hogs Kisses Farm Sanctuary because as we are now opening our barn doors this year, I get this question all the time. What is a sanctuary? From my perspective, I think most people have in their mind from childhood the stories of the farmer and E-I-E-I-O, right, where the animals are running around and are on plenty of ample space and such, right, and living out their happy lives. So in people's minds, they think, well, why would you need a sanctuary? What is a sanctuary? So today, we are going to tackle that topic, and we have with us Dina from White Pig Animal Sanctuary, and we have Sarah from Rockfish Wildlife Sanctuary. So there are actually many different kinds of sanctuaries, which again kind of clouds the issue, but we want to unpack it and help define things today. So welcome, ladies.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Excited
having
to be
me.
here.
Absolutely. So I would like to just maybe begin a little bit with some background on sanctuaries because as you can see, we have a few different representatives here. We have farmed sanctuaries, which obviously Hogs Kisses is one, so we'll talk and start with that. But we do have wildlife. And then I think I've heard that categories of sanctuaries go with like companion animals. So that might be more of your dog, cat shelters or rescues, which again, these are all terms that we'll flesh out as well in this discussion. And then also too, there are, say, exotics animals. Also there are sanctuaries too for, any kind of animal, right, that's out there. So there's many different types of work that occurs in that, and we'd like to make sure we tackle that discussion. Okay, so let's actually start with farm sanctuaries, being that Hogs and Kisses is one. And what we'd like to do is start with some history maybe there. So as I mentioned, people have in their minds this idea of farms that today might be considered more like backyard farmers per se, where it's more of that traditional old school farming. But over the years where a lot more productivity needed to occur around farming or providing animal products on tables, there were scientists over the years that looked at how can we have more efficient models for producing animals and animal meat. And so they would apply those kinds of models to the agricultural world. Well, having done that, certain effects occurred where you might have animals on a lot less space than they need, animals being fed food that they probably shouldn't. Maybe you're trying to fatten them up so that you can get them sold and such. And because of that, they might then develop illnesses, so you're now medicating them and so forth. So there are a lot of these practices that have come out as an effect of trying to overproduce animals. So in 1986, the very first farm sanctuary was started by Gene Bauer, which literally is called the Farm Sanctuary. And that came about because of these these effects. We would consider them to be somewhat abuses of agriculture and farming. And so he began to then take in these farm animals. And since then, we now have grown and have more and more sanctuaries popping up all over. So we ourselves are starting, but I've also invited here Dina from White Pig Animal Sanctuary. So I'm wondering, Dina, maybe could you tell a little bit about when you started, why you started, what kind of animals you have?
Sure. Yes, I've been doing this for 25 years now. I got into it because I saw that at the time there was an explosion of mini pigs, which can be considered farm animals and or companions. People were getting them as pets, and they were quickly relinquishing them to like they did not fit into their family, the dog model, and there was an explosion of mini pigs that needed homes. And I started working as a volunteer for another farm sanctuary in West Virginia, and I decided that there wasn't enough farm sanctuaries at the time. This was back in the 90s, and decided to open up the White Pig, meaning that I moved down to Virginia and started my vegan bed and breakfast and the sanctuary. Over time, we've taken in, obviously, farm pigs, horses, who are also part of the food chain that a lot of sanctuaries don't acknowledge. And we have goats right now, and we're expanding into bovine and fowl.
Nice. And you said this was 25 years ago?
25 years ago, I started rescuing. I got into it because I had gotten a pig as a present from my mom. And she thought that was a great idea. So I was vegetarian at the time, but that catapulted me into being a vegan. I was very active in animal rights in college, started Syracuse University for Animal Rights. And actually our group was one of the very first groups that adopted an animal from Farm Sanctuary.
Oh, wow.
So that was back in 1988.
Okay.
So I've been doing this a long time.
Wow.
So I moved down here and started my sanctuary, and operated as a private sanctuary, which is a way you can go about it, which means you fully fund it on your own. Over time, I realized that we had only limited amount of funds as a person, and needed to rescue more animals, and started the not-for-profit. So we were able to bring in more animals, and this also opened up the opportunity to do educational outreach, which is a really big part of what we do now, teaching people about factory farming and how cruel it is to the animals, and getting them to relate the food on their plate with the animals at the sanctuary, and making better choices about their diet.
Right. Yeah.
Where did the first few animals actually come from?
So my very first rescue was a pig who was running loose in Harlem. Her name was Olive.
Harlem, New York City.
Yes.
Wow.
And she was picked up by animal control and brought into animal control in New York, and they had no place to put her, so they put her in the pit bull section.
Oh, wow.
And we had to go and get her right away, because dogs and pigs do not work.
Right.
She went to shock, and we brought her in, and she ended up getting very sick, and we nursed her back to health. And after that, the calls just kept coming in of pigs that needed to get rescued. So I took in another one from another shelter, and another one that was running stray, and all of a sudden I had a lot of pigs on a quarter of an acre and needed to expand. So that's when we came down here and bought 172 acres, so we could have a lot more space for these little animals that needed homes.
Absolutely.
So I get a lot of my animals mostly at this juncture from animal control. They come from abuse and abandonment situations, running stray. There's plenty of owner surrenders. Unfortunately, we cannot take in every owner surrender because there are so many, and we only have a limited space. And because we're not a rescue, all the animals that come into the sanctuary live out their natural lives there. We do not adopt out. So that is basically the difference between a sanctuary and a rescue. Is a sanctuary takes in animals, they live out their natural lives there. Rescue tries to rehabilitate them, find homes for them, and place them, but that is not what we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is such a good distinction because there are many places that will utilize rescue in their title, but maybe they also have some sanctuary animals. Or flip that, right? They call themselves sanctuary, but they really do more of the rescue and rehabilitation and adopt out. So actually, we also have Sarah from Wildlife Sanctuary, which they do use sanctuary, right, in their name. But I believe, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, that a majority of the work is rescue, rehabilitate, and then release, actually, because it's wildlife, right? Why don't you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so our sanctuary has been around since 2004, actually. Our founder took in an injured crow in Charlottesville, and then suddenly everyone else in Charlottesville kept giving her injured and orphaned animals. She was able to obtain her federal and state permits to be a wildlife rehabilitator, and she operated our sanctuary out of her home. And as you can imagine, there are only so many animals you can keep in your house. So we were able to expand and open up a standalone wildlife rehabilitation facility in 2015 here in Virginia. So at the facility, we do a majority of our work is wildlife rehabilitation.
Okay.
So that's primarily our mission there. Every year we take in about 800 animals.
Wow.
And we only take in native species. So unlike both of your sanctuaries that deal with domestic animals, we only have permission to take in animals that you would find naturally in the wilds that haven't been domesticated by people. So, what was the question?
Right, yes. No, this is good. So, okay, mostly rehabilitation.
Yes.
So walk us through that. So a rescue would look like what? Let's say, and I think you've brought an advocate today, right?
Yes.
With us who we'll meet, hopefully.
Yes.
So let's take a possum, because many people have possums around in their backyards or such. So let's say a possum needs rescuing. What is that situation? Is it that it's injured? Is it that it got hit by a car? Or how does that,
Yeah, so a lot of people, when we're kids, we're trained, okay, when there's a human emergency, you call the fire department, you call the police, you are trained to know these resources from the day you're born in case of an emergency. But what are you supposed to do when you find a tiny little pink squirrel on the ground or an opossum that's been hit by a car? So we serve to kind of be that resource for folks. A lot of calls come in from people that have encountered either an orphaned animal, so it seems perfectly healthy other than the fact that it's tiny and alone and probably shouldn't be, or an animal that has been injured. And we've been getting an increasing number of injury calls in the past few years with a lot of expansion of local cities like Charlottesville and Lynchburg. So when people find an animal in need like that, they'll give us a ring, and we'll either connect them to our veterinarians at the Wildlife Center of Virginia, or we'll have them bring the animal to us. And so once that animal is admitted, it is a patient, and our goal is always to release the animal. So we rescue, rehab, and release, and we do release the majority of our patients, but there are some cases where an animal, for whatever medical or behavioral reason, cannot be safely released into the wilds, and a surprising number of animals that have been kept as pets. So we have a variety of education ambassador animals that, again, are not our pets. They're kind of like my coworkers, I call them. But they serve as education ambassadors for their species, and many of them came in because someone saw a baby vulture and said, that would be a great pet. Not so great of a pet.
Right.
Scarlet Pearl, our Virginia opossum, who I can take out.
Sure, why not?
She was one of our patients that came in after her mother had been hit by a car, and her whole litter of Joeys, as they're called, were orphaned, and most of them were fine and releasable. But when we went to check on Scarlet Pearl on the day of her scheduled release, she was exhibiting some difficulty getting around. So she was neurologic, as we say. So she was deemed medically non-releasable by our veterinarians.
Okay.
And I'm going to put these gloves on because they have the most teeth of any mammal in North America. So I always like to be safe. And again, she is a wild animal, so even though she looks cute and cuddly, the gloves are a necessity.
Sure.
Okay, let's see. Sometimes she gets real bundled up in there. This is probably...
Yeah, it's a bit of a cold day here in Charlottesville.
Yes.
So.
Oh, ma'am. This is going to be an edit out moment.
No problem. No problem.
Just shifting her around. There we go. Hi, ma'am.
Oh,
She is a big girl.
adorable. Oh.
So, Scarlet Pearl is quite old, which is surprising because Scarlet Pearl is only 2.5 years old.
Wow.
So that is very old for a Virginia opossum. Typically in the wilds, they'll live 1 to 2 years, 2 years if they're really lucky. But she has been a wonderful ambassador for her species, and she, I think, represents the sanctuary part of our mission. So we provide a temporary sanctuary for the rehab patients that come into us,
Yes.
but then we provide a more permanent sanctuary for ambassador animals like Scarlet Pearl that just wouldn't make it so well in the wild. Right, Scarlet Pearl?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, this is a really good point that's making me think now, right, is whenever we see, animals, or even if it's just companion animals, I have plenty of close friends or so forth that always want to just go and pick them up or go and touch, right, the animal, because we're so drawn, to them. And we think, oh, we feel a love thing, so let me go and express that. But many a times, animals should be left alone because we don't want to force them to do things that they're not, natural to or what have you. So that's really great.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
What
So
animals would you say people think will be good pets and try to make them pets and then end up in the sanctuary?
So you're looking at one of those animals. We did just get a new education ambassador opossum this year because somebody found one as a baby and kept it for 2 months. And that may not sound like a lot when we're thinking about dogs or cats that have longer lives, but 2 months out of an opossum's lifespan is very much too long for them. They become too habituated for humans. To humans. They become too habituated to humans. So this opossum came to us and it was way too comfortable around us, wanted to hang out with us, climb on us, so it really wouldn't have been a good candidate for release. Mammals are often the animals that people are drawn to. We get about 4 to 5 raccoons per year that have been kept as pets, sometimes for more than 1 or 2 years. Sometimes they've been like lifelong family pets for people. So, and it's unfortunate because in a lot of those scenarios, release just is no longer an option.
Right. Yeah.
So the best thing to do when you find an animal that maybe you're not so sure about, is it orphaned, does it need help, always just give us a call or find a wildlife rehabber near you, because they will know the answer and they'll make sure that that animal gets the best possible chance to go back to the wild where they belong.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
She's just a little, she's cold sensitive, so I have her in a little blankie. As I mentioned, she's very old for an opossum, so she lives inside in the winter to prevent her arthritis from flaring up. But yeah, as much as we love providing a sanctuary for wild animals at Rockfish, ultimately the goal of a rehabilitation facility is for that animal to never have to live in a sanctuary long term.
Right.
We're happy to provide that temporary safe haven for them, but we want them to get back out in the wild so they can eat ticks. Like if you're an opossum, you can go out and eat the thousands of ticks you were born to eat.
And which is, by the way, very important in Virginia in the summer. Tick issue here.
A lot of ticks.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And so, do you also provide, so I know that Dina and I talked, she was also saying that people come to the sanctuary, right, to come and learn. Do people come to Rockfish as well, like on tours and do education there? Or do you go out also and take, like you are doing here with Scarlet Pearl, out to to folks?
So we do both. So
Okay.
we're technically not open to the public, but I always love giving tours if folks call and schedule a couple of weeks in advance. It's a little tougher during our baby season when we have hundreds of animals there at a time that need rehabilitation and care.
Yeah.
However, during the winter time, like this time of year when it's chilly, I get to go out to school groups when there's not a global pandemic and bring my education ambassador animals there. So
Sure.
that provides a really great opportunity, similar to what you were saying about trying to build empathy in folks so that when they look at their plate, they think of the animals that they've met.
Yes.
It's not that we eat opossums, but it's a similar feeling that we're trying to instill in folks. We want people to see an opossum up close and learn how important they are to our ecosystem, so the next time they see them, they're more captivated and excited by them instead of grossed out or confused.
Right.
So that's our goal as well.
Yeah. And I think also too, right, Dina, you have a bunch of education outreach programs too, right? And I think, right, Dora in particular is, right?
So she's a Mishi and Kuni mix.
Okay.
She arrived at the sanctuary. Somebody left her at the gate in a crate.
No.
Is that a type of pig?
Yeah.
Could you repeat it, please?
Kuni Mishian mix.
Wow.
And she's very, very friendly. Somebody apparently had purchased her as a present for Christmas because she arrived 3 days after Christmas.
Right.
In the rain, in the dark, in the cold, at our gate.
Goodness.
But one of the other things that we were talking about, the distinctions between like companion animal sanctuaries, farm animal sanctuaries, wild animal sanctuaries. Ironically enough, we kind of do all those things because we have actually taken in several feral pigs into the sanctuary, that are, basically born in the wild. That if they're not removed from those situations, they will be shot and killed.
Right.
So we have quite a few ferals at the sanctuary right now, and they're really actually amazing ambassadors as well, because people think that wild pigs are very aggressive and they're going to try to kill you, and they are some of the sweetest pigs we have.
Right.
So it's another thing that we are involved in. It is a problem because people will actually breed them and release them into the wild to hunt, and then they have an overpopulation of pigs that are like destroying the environment, and they're not indigenous.
Right.
So it's trying to provide homes for them as well.
Yeah.
Is that legal in Virginia?
It is not.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that people do not.
It happens.
Right.
Yep, it happens.
People do it.
I mean, the problem in Texas was completely created by people introducing wild hogs into the environment, and now there's an overpopulation of it.
Right.
So, and unfortunately, there just isn't enough sanctuaries to take it in. And it's very similar. We have a BLM horse, a Bureau of Land Management wild horse with us right now. And it's the same problem, is that people want to graze cattle out in the plains and in national forests, and the horses are eating the grass, and they claim that they have disease, but they don't actually. They just don't want them there because it's competition for the cattle. So horses have a very similar problem, wild horses. So we are hoping to get more into rescuing BLM horses, and but the one we have now was completely feral, had never been handled, and now he's a real sweetheart. So wild pigs and wild horses can come around really well and become ambassadors for all these plights that are going on.
And that's Atlas you're speaking of, right?
Atlas,
yes, of course, yeah.
And that's an interesting point as well that you brought up about how you do take in wild and feral animals, because it's important for sanctuaries to work together.
Yes,
and we've gotten calls before about folks saying, there's a pig wandering around the road, or I found a feral hog in the woods, what do I do? And so having resources like y'all to connect folks to helps basically find a better solution for that animal.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And Dina, you have a bed and breakfast, you said.
I do.
And you do like tours and that sort of thing?
We do regular tours. We are out there 2 to 3 times a week, taking people around, introducing them to the animals, talking about, because our property is in conservation easement, talking about land conservation, also creating environments for wildlife. So we try to incorporate as much into our sanctuary, which is a little bit different than your standard farm sanctuary, because I believe that education is really the way to create change.
Absolutely.
So that animals don't need to be rescued.
Right.
The less we eat, the less we hunt, the more we create environments that are friendly for wildlife and not destroying their environment. The more the bigger impact we can make as a sanctuary and as humans, you know.
Absolutely.
And what's that experience like when somebody comes on who's an omnivore who hasn't quite made that connection? What's that experience
It
like?
is, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can tell you I've had loads of people that have come and been like, I've never pet a pig before. You know, I've eaten a pig. But I've never pet a pig. And they do go home and they'll write me, and I'm like, I can't even consider eating a pig again, or, you know, cow or whatever. They really make the connection because we're so disassociated from our food source.
Exactly.
It comes wrapped in this nice little package in the supermarket, that when a lot of times you do go out and you do meet these animals and you get to like have empathy and compassion for them, you don't want to be part of their suffering anymore. So that is really the greatest message I think as a farm animal sanctuary you can create for the public. And
absolutely.
I think a lot of times people think it's about those animals on the farm, and it is. You know, every single life saved is a precious life saved.
Right.
But sometimes we don't think about the bigger picture of how important it is to help people connect through that actual physical connection.
Because we can only rescue a small amount of animals.
That's exactly right.
But I think on average, regular, you know, a standard American diet eats about 83 animals a year. So imagine just that one person not consuming animal product is saving 83 animals, and then you multiply that down the line. It's an enormous amount of animals that are saved versus what we can fill up at a sanctuary.
Absolutely. And you know, on this note, Hogs and Kisses, we are going to be a micro sanctuary, right? So this micro sanctuary movement also has come about, where because sanctuaries, as Dina knows as well, Sarah knows, it takes a lot of resources. To start it up, build it properly, have everybody protected well, continue things on. How many animals can you take in? I mean, it is a tall order. So we certainly are going to take animals in, and yes, like Ella is saying, we'll have an X number here, right? And that might be 10, 15 or so. But actually our extended mission is to be able to help other people who want to start their own micro sanctuaries as well. So part of us doing educational series like this is for that point of being able to pique that interest, help people get educated on what is available and possible for them. Certainly we'd love to have visitors here too once we open our barn doors, so that you can have more of that personal connection. But we will absolutely want to continue to provide this kind of education out.
And Dina, how do you say no? That's what I'm most worried about, is having to not be able to take an animal in.
Well, our motto is you can only help the animal that's right in front of you. So a lot of times we are presented with an animal with no other options. So we will try to, you know, make room for them. But yes, you always have to keep the animals in your care, that their priority is always the highest. So, you know, you have to make sure the funding is there, the housing is there. The funding is there for an exponential amount of time. So sometimes you just have to say, I just don't have the place for it now. I just don't. And you know that's caring for the animals that you've already said yes to. And it's probably the hardest part about having an animal sanctuary is having to say no.
So this is interesting, right? So from a wildlife perspective, it's about the ultimate goal is having them move out. But with farm sanctuaries, it's such a different context because it tends to be their last stop, right? Unless you're rescuing and trying to then have that animal rehomed somewhere else. But again, there's so few sanctuaries to where they could go. So it is a very interesting, different dynamic. You can actually help to rescue and rehabilitate larger numbers because of that reason.
Right.
You're turning out for them where then they can go in nature, right? Yeah.
What about fostering? Is that a thing in the sanctuary world?
I mean, absolutely. We don't do fostering because we just don't have the manpower to keep up on where all these animals are going, to do home inspections. That in and of itself can be its own thing. You know, because we've focused the whole idea under education and just so we have a small amount of animals, meaning under 100, that are ambassadors. That doesn't mean that we don't take animals that don't particularly like human interaction. You know, we're not expecting anything from them, but there are just some that come in that are just really want to, you know, interact with humans, and they're great ambassadors. So our job is to convince people, you know, don't eat meat or don't get a mini pig as a pet.
Right. Yes.
You know, or make people aware of these different situations like the Bureau of Land Management horses or how cows are raised in a factory environment for dairy, and make better choices so that we don't have to rescue so many.
Right.
Because we're just never going to get on top of the problem if we just have thousands of sanctuaries. It will put a very little dent in the big picture of saving animals.
Yes.
Unlike what you're doing where people, you know, animals like fly into houses or they get hit by cars.
Right.
You're more of an ambulatory, you know, but we're just trying to convince people just not to, you know, be a part of the exploitation of farmed animals.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, and I get the question plenty of times, okay, so you're opening up a sanctuary, so that means, can I just bring my kids and we can like pet the animals and and stuff like this, right? And so I usually say, well, you know, of course we'll have educational programs where you can come and learn about them and meet them, but it's to make a very big line in the sand, sanctuary rescue, rehabilitation, release, sanctuary work, anything in those, or fostering and adopting out, right? Anything within those activities tends to be nonprofit work. Things like a petting zoo, circus, places like SeaWorld, right? Okay, these are all using the animal for some type of entertainment and expecting them to do something. So we tend to look at that as exploitation of that animal. You're making a profit, it's for profit. Or commodifying the animal in some way, like let me cut their wool off and, you know, make a sweater or whatever it is. So, you know, we really are looking more at the philosophy and approach is always, what does that animal need? Not what will that animal do for me by putting profit into the pocket. It's actually the other way around.
Yeah, and I think that's why your mission strikes me as so important of trying to help a lot of other micro sanctuaries start, because on the one hand, while these larger for-profit organizations are exploitative of animals, on the other hand, when I was a little kid, I loved SeaWorld, and that was how I started my love of animals, because that was my big exposure.
Sure.
You know, I was that crazy marine biology girl in 3rd grade because I went to SeaWorld once.
Right.
So I think improving or increasing the number of sanctuaries that are available to do these wonderful outreach programs helps reduce the likelihood that those big for-profit endeavors are the only educational resource kids can use.
Yes.
And hopefully kids will be able to turn to your sanctuary or our wildlife sanctuary as those resources rather than things like SeaWorld.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so now that we've established some definitions around what is a sanctuary, but then the work around rescuing, rehabilitating, and so forth, adopting out animals, all of this, we thought it might be helpful to hear from Dina and Sarah about some tips. Maybe from a wildlife rescue perspective, and then also too from a farm sanctuary rescue perspective. So Sarah, what are some things that you can maybe help their viewers around wildlife if they do happen to come across a baby deer or a fawn or like you were saying, a joey? What could they do, or who should they reach out to? What should be done?
Yeah, so I think the biggest tip, and the tip that I'm still reminding myself all the time, is never assume that you know what you're doing. So with a wild animal, you never want to assume that you should, or that you can pick it up, that you should or you can rehabilitate it. You always want to pause and call a professional. So that can be calling a wildlife rehabilitator like us, calling your veterinarian that might be able to connect you to the right resource for that animal. But always pause and make sure that you are getting someone on the phone that is likely going to have a better idea of what to do in that situation. So I think that's the big general tip that I have for folks, is always call a wildlife rehabilitator when you encounter an animal in need, as opposed, or just generally getting involved in sanctuaries. We love taking in new volunteers. We offer summer internship programs, and then a lot of sanctuaries will have Amazon wish lists where they'll post things. We currently are in need of lots of gloves and feather dusters for the baby season coming up. It's always great to check in with your local nonprofits and figure out what specific supplies do they need beyond just basic financial donations.
Sure.
So I think those would be my biggest tips. On how to help out.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so what about from a farm sanctuary perspective? Do you have any tips? Because obviously very different context, right?
So I think if you would like to get into rescuing farmed animals, volunteering at a farmed animal sanctuary is definitely your first go-to. So you could learn about, there's so many different, depending on what kind of animal you're rescuing, health, the feed, the care, setting up an environment for them that is very interactive for them. Lots of space is always a good thing. So coming out and volunteering. One of the things we do, if you would like to have a pig but probably shouldn't, sponsor a pig. Come out and sponsor one. This way you can come out and spend time with them and support them, and that allows farmed animal sanctuaries to take in more animals. And then obviously we do again have wish lists and things like that. And just again, if you want to do it, do a lot of research first. Don't just be like, I'm just going to go out and rescue this animal.
I think the point about volunteering first is so crucial, because a lot of times folks don't quite know the degree of manual labor, for example, that goes into caring for wild animals or big domestic animals. So I think that's really a great way for people to help animals, is first find a place near you that's already doing it, and figure out how you can get involved there.
Absolutely. And actually on that note, I have been volunteering over at White Pig. Dina's been really great. Dina and Caleb have been amazing. And even just from something like what kind of fencing is around and that she's using, and are there predators in the area? And these are things, I've never grown up on a farm. I've never had any farm animal experience whatsoever. So I thought, okay, I need to get some education before I go and I start my own, So I highly second that notion. Go out and help and volunteer, for sure.
I certainly didn't know just how many funds you needed.
Oh, yes.
Well,
the money
the expense
aspect
is a lot. So
it sure is.
Yeah.
And on that note, being that we'll be a micro sanctuary, if you're interested in starting your own micro sanctuary, again, the expanded mission for Hogs and Kisses will be to help those who do. And specifically what we'll be doing is once we get ourselves established, opened our barn doors, all of that this year, we will begin fundraising to create grants for starting up your micro sanctuary, because a lot of funding goes towards sanctuaries that are a little more established. So we want to help with that beginning phase for anybody who maybe just wants to take in some chickens or bunnies or what have you, and wants to get started. We'd absolutely love to be a resource for you in that. Well, this has been so awesome, ladies.
So fun.
We're so happy you were able to join us.
and thank you, our viewers, for beating around the barn with us.